Alright, I just recorded this entire video without any audio, so that was fun. Let's do it again. So hello and welcome back. So after my two introductory videos, I'm finally ready to actually start talking about my Malazan reread, starting of course with Gardens of the Moon. Now, even though this is my first reread of the entire series, it was actually the fourth time I read Gardens of the Moon. As I mentioned in my last video, I first read it about 15 years ago, and then when I decided to start Malazan again, I started listening to the audiobook. And that was the wrong way to go about things. Malazan is not suitable for audio, at least not with my attention span. So I went back to my dear old paperback to read it a third time, and then I read the whole series afterwards. And now I've reread it. Now I'm rereading the series, so I've been through Gardens of the Moon 4 times. So needless to say, if you read a book 4 times, obviously you would suspect that I really love this book, and of course I do. Still a great read. So many new things pop up on every read through. I love it. I think it's severely underrated amongst the Malazan veterans. And no, it's not that hard. It's not as hard as people will try to tell you that it is. Just read the words on the page. If you get distracted by a lack of explaining everything from the get-go, that's not on the author. I beg your pardon. Stephen Erickson never promised you a rose garden. He did not set your expectations. You did. Anyway, so this will just be a collection of random thoughts and reflections relating to my reread, which at this point occurred almost 6 months ago, maybe even more at this point. So there are plenty of things that I will have that I picked up and wanted to discuss, but have now forgotten about. So let's start. So even at the beginning, I still have, after all these read-throughs, I still have trouble keeping track of everything that happens with the future Sorry and her interactions with Riga and everything that happens there. At this point, though, I can start to sort out what is going on because I know what's going on. But I mean, it's there. But even when you know what you look for, I don't think it's that obvious. Shadow, Throne, and Cotillion shows up early in the first book. My question is, have they formed their master plan at this point, or do they just want to mess with Lacine? I'm not sure. And now, by the way, I finally understand everyone who catches who these gods started out as. Erickson himself thought it was obvious, but it took me 4 reads before I realized that it's actually quite clearly stated in book 1. I don't know how I missed it the first 3 times through it, but no, I didn't get it. Chapter 2, we need to talk about Chapter 2. Still one of my favorite chapters of this entire series, one of the best chapters in any fantasy I've read. What a way to kick off a book at the point where most series would end. And it's not even the last battle of that size that we get to see. Still waiting for the Moranth spin-off series. There's so much we never get to know. And on a side note, regarding that chapter, me and a colleague started this book club at work a few years ago for the nerds at the department. There are apparently a few nerds in academia. Who would have thought? Anyway, for the next month's reading assignment, I have decided to introduce the group to Malazan. And I'll be doing that by having them read this chapter 2 of Gardens. My thinking is that if that doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will. I don't know what to tell you. And I'll probably also have them read the story of Beak from Reaper's Scale. I think I'll cut and paste it for them. let's get back on track. So I still have no clue as to what Opon is up to, what the purpose is of their meddling. They are the gods of chance after all, so did they just stumble into this overarching divine scheme? And this whole thing about Crocus being the coin bearer, still don't get it, still don't get Crocus. Why is it important? What does it mean? Never latched on to Crocus. He doesn't. I don't think it gets interesting until Todd the Hounds, and by that point, there's so much stuff going on. One thing, I wonder if anyone who possibly sees this has any thoughts on this. So, when Ganos meets Hood's servant, not Hood, right? It's his servant, if I remember correctly, at Hood's gate. He's sent back, but Hood will need someone else in return, someone close to him. After reading the entire series and currently rereading The Bone Hunters, that someone has to be Felicin, right? And are we then to believe that this is the moment that sets all the dominoes falling? Because Felicin's fate is what sets Tavor on her path that takes us through the entire series right on, up to the big climax at the end of the last book. And if this is the case, did Hood realize what he was setting in motion? I have no idea. And at the end of the book, the entire Fett, still so much fun to read. The entire book is just a delight to read. And now that I realize that the acorn / finest doesn't, I mean, it doesn't grow to become the Asath house as you actually might imagine on the first read, but that the house springs up around it to keep raised from spreading chaos and destruction, I guess. A lot of things make much more sense now. A lot of the stuff that goes on by the end of the book. Now, what I didn't get from this book on this reread, and what I had expected to get, was the feeling that the board is set and the pieces are moving, and I don't really get that. That will come later, though. Exactly when it's hard to say, but somewhere in the timeline along Deadhouse Gate and Memories of Ice that of course occur concurrently. Yeah, but I was surprised that I didn't get that feeling, really. Anyway, a great read, of course. Now I'll head out into the tropical rain here in Guangzhou, the food capital of China, to get some dinner. But first, let's kill that mule.